Good morning, everyone. Absolutely delightful to see so many people so early. My name is Christy Coleman. I'm the Executive Director of the Jamestown Yorktown Foundation, a member of the Commission for the Virginia 250th, and Chair of the Council of the American Association for State and Local History, and on behalf of all of those organizations, and our host, Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. This morning, I have the distinct honor and pleasure of introducing Justice from the Supreme Court of Virginia retired, the Honorable John Charles Thomas. The former Justice of the Supreme Court of Virginia, John Charles Thomas, graduated from the University of Virginia with a bachelor's in American government in 1972. He next attended UVA School of Law and received his Juris Doctor in 1975. Thomas joined Hunton and Williams and became the first African American at that firm. He was admitted to the law firm's partnership in April of 1982, but that lasted a year, because in 1983, he was appointed to the Supreme Court of Virginia, becoming not only the first African American, but at the age of 32, the youngest person to sit there. That is worth your applause. But here's the thing, he retired from the court in 1989. He wasn't barely 40. That's how you should do it, right? Anyway, following his retirement from the court, Judge Thomas practiced law in Richmond, and he was a part of the Hunton Andrews Kurth LLP law firm. In 1995, he received the NAACP's Lifetime Image Award. In 2005, Thomas was named a member of the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which is based in Lucerne, Switzerland, which hears cases arising from most world-class sporting competition and has global jurisdiction. In 2006, Thomas was appointed to the Board of Visitors of the College of William and Mary, also an institution near and dear to my heart, and a position to which he was reappointed in 2009. He's also very active in the community. He's a member of the Boulé. He's a member of various social, health, legal organizations, and has had an impact with his wit, his honor, his humor, and his grace. Gentlemen and ladies, please welcome to the stage Justice Thomas.
Good morning, my dear friends. We are at the perfect place in the nation to put our heads together to think about what we ought to be doing for the 250th anniversary of the independence of the United States of America. Right up the road is Jamestown. And when you are born in Virginia and go to school in Virginia like I did, I'm born in 1950, and in my time, you took Virginia history in the 4th grade, and in the 7th grade, and again in high school in the 10th grade. And every time we took Virginia history, we had to have the trip to Jamestown, Yorktown, and Williamsburg. And every time we came here, we got to see the 3 ships, and we got to see the glass blower, and we got to go over to the battlefield at Yorktown. It's part of you when you come from Virginia to live in this time. But even when I was a little boy, it struck me very hard that it was amazing that in 1619, 2 definitive events occurred. Y'all know what it is. It's the first representative government in the New World, the House of Burgesses, and at the same time, the first boatload of black people in bondage from Angola. They might have landed a little further away than Jamestown, but by the end of the day, they were at Jamestown and in enslavement. And so I always wondered from the time of my childhood, how are you going to do that? How are you going to have slavery and freedom almost at the same moment in time? It was the beginning of the American schism. It put a wound on our nation that is still there today. It gives us something to focus on, to work on, and hope that we can change. But that's just the beginning. The story goes on. In this same region, this became the capital of Virginia. You know, the Capitol down the street, down Duke of Gloucester Street, and the college over here, the Wren building and the Brafferton and such, and it's a perfect mile from one building to the other. Well, Thomas Jefferson, who y'all have heard about, he's born up in the mountains of Virginia, April 13, 1743. He's a smart kid. He's tutored and he learns from family instructors and such in his time, and he reads great books and such. But then when he's 17 years old, in 1760, he gets to come to the College of William and Mary in Virginia. He comes down here and he is dazzled. Now we think of Jefferson as this worldwide figure. The Francophile, the person who mastered a new language every time he got on a sailing vessel to go somewhere in the world. The man who wrote 22,000 letters. We think of this Jefferson who was a philosopher and an enlightened man, but when he came here, he was a teenager. And he saw something that he had never seen before. I mean, just think now. To us, we look at Duke of Gloucester Street and we go, oh, that's pretty. But when you come from the mountains, you're born in Shadwell, down near the Rivanna River. You come to Williamsburg, like this is the biggest thing. This is like Broadway. He ain't never seen no buildings like this. And he lived in the Wren building, living in a brick house, which is always a big deal when you start in a clapboard house. Now, his daddy was Peter, and he had books and all this, but Jefferson comes here and he evolves, he learns. He meets with the first law professor in the New World, right at the College of William and Mary. The president is here. My wife and other friends are here. People I love all my life are in this room, and it's so important for me to help us get this history right. But this young Jefferson, this smart kid, he learns and he becomes a lawyer. In 1867, he's a lawyer. Now, if you follow his life, he did something at almost every level. He was a local government. And then he was state government, and he was governor, and then he was international, and then he was national. He did the thing that we want to call on our citizens to do now, and we want to remind them to do as we go into the 250th celebration. He participated in the government of this new nation. And one of the things that he did that we want to focus on today for the push it makes on history is he writes the Declaration of Independence. Now, he's raised with black enslaved people as a child. He has black enslaved people as a grown man. And he knew that it was a problem. In the notes on the state of Virginia, he talks about he fears for the good of the nation and the soul of America to have the wolf by the ears, which is slavery is that he's talking about. But he writes the words that resonate all across the world. He says as a grown man, he's 32, 33 years old, and he says, we hold these truths to be self-evident. That all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. But whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, maintaining its principles on such bases and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such forms and to find new gods for their future security. Doesn't it resonate with you even now? It makes the hair stand up on your arms. And it does that because it said something that reaches into our souls, and it was been repeated through time. Abraham Lincoln repeated some of those words in the Gettysburg Address. Martin Luther King repeated those words. If you look at the accounts of the students in Tiananmen Square in China, they repeated these words. I sat on the steps of Monticello with Gorbachev himself, talking to him, me, a colored kid from the housing projects in Norfolk, sitting with the leader of the Soviet Union on the steps of Monticello. And I said, well, Mr. Gorbachev, did you ever read Jefferson? And he goes, yes, I did. And he said, and that was in the period of glasnost and perestroika. And so I was left to wonder whether Jefferson might even have affected the leader of the Soviet Union in his time. But as we focus in on this for the celebration that's coming, there are some things that we need to look at. Now, people say that what Jefferson did in the Declaration was to put into words what they call the Lockean model of human rights. John Locke, the English professor. Now, Jefferson said life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. John Locke had said life, liberty, and property. Now, some scholars say, and you know how scholars do, they can take something and twist it around, and you might not be exactly sure that they think about stuff. Come on. But some scholars say that the reason Jefferson left out property and changed that word to happiness is because he didn't want anybody to think that he was talking about slavery. Well, I don't know. Maybe that's right, maybe that's wrong, but the effect is the same. He did not say property. And these words keep coming. And at the Seneca Falls Conference of Women, they repeated that. In the Hamilton play, I love the part where one of the Schuyler sisters says, when she meets Jefferson, she gonna get him to include men and women. Now, I'm a poet myself, and I've looked at Jefferson's word, and I've tried to fix it so that it's more inclusive than it is, and I can't yet figure it out, but I'm gonna keep on working on it, see if we can get a better example of what he did. But those words make a difference, and here's what I think. Now, when we go about teaching this, we're going to have to find a structure to teach this to our children. And I think, now when we were in school, some of y'all will remember they taught us about the melting pot. That's America. Y'all remember that? Now, I never actually liked that, even when I was young, because it was like a blending down. It was a taking of what you were and kind of making it go away through heat and such. I have come to love, though, the idea of the American tapestry, and I want to promote that as the way we teach this story to our children, because y'all know that a tapestry has structure, the structured elements that run vertically that they call the warp, and then it has the colored, layered picture-making element called the weft. Some people say the warp and the weave. Others properly say the warp and the weft. And if you do the tapestry of America, then you are able to do this. You can show each thread of each color running through the portrait of America for as long or as short as it was. You can show black and white. You can show red, the blood. You can show blue, the water. You can show green, the mountainsides. You can show the gold that we discovered. You can show the joy of America, and you can weave a picture so that you can stand back and look at the continental United States stretching from sea to shining sea. And you can see the fields of grain and the buffalo herds, and you can see the whole majesty of America. Or you can bring your students up closer to it, and you can take out a spyglass and you can look closely at it, and you can see where there was pain and there was struggle. You can see where there was joy and there was overcoming. Now, there's discussion sometimes about the question whether we ought to tell the unvarnished truth about America or whether we should plaster over where we came from and what we did. And I want to say to you this: what virtue is there in telling our children that it was an easy trip to make America what it is today? Who can't walk down a flat, level highway that drains on both sides, and all you got to do is stay in the middle like an interstate highway? But what virtue is that? Isn't the story much more magnificent when we say that we started with slavery? We started with pain and suffering. We started with indentured servitude. We started with violence and anger, and we evolved into what we are. But to do it, it took a whole lot. It took a whole lot of courage. It took a whole lot of overcoming. It took a whole lot of mountain climbing. It took a whole lot of going down in the valley. It took a whole lot of prayers. It took a whole lot of tears. Isn't that the better story to tell our people? I was making a speech, and when you're the first black justice in the history of Virginia, when Black History Month come along, people are going to be calling you. And so I make like a speech a day in Black History Month. But anyway, I was called upon to make a speech at one of the facilities in Virginia, and I was talking to them, and when I finished talking, somebody said, "Well, Justice, what about this question of how we should present history? Should we tell the truth?" And my immediate response was, "Have you ever been to the doctor?" And they go like, "Well, what the hell is wrong with him? Did he not hear the question? what is he, like off pace or something?" And I said, every time you go to the doctor, the first thing you got to do is fill out your family history. Because if you don't get the family history right, the doctor might not get the treatment right. The family history of America ain't easy. The family history of America is hurtful and painful, but we have got to tell the family history of America if we ever want to be able to overcome. Now, the men who wrote, and it was men who wrote the Constitution of our nation, they begin what? You know the words, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union." That has an admission built in it. If you're going to form a more perfect union, it's not perfect when you start. It's hopeful that it might become perfect, which is why you say it that way. And so if anybody wants to say, "Well, you know, it was just so wonderful at the beginning and everything was fine and God, it was a bed of roses and we just had a good time and nobody starved or nothing and nobody got beat or anything and nobody got frozen on the underpass," and none of that stuff happened, you know, it ain't no problem. No, it don't even sound right. It doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound right just the way that somebody winning an election by 99% don't sound right. Now, as I'm working on this discussion for you today, we had a meeting yesterday of a group that's related to this, and they gave us what they call data points. And one of the data points, there's two data points that stick in my mind, but one data point is that 41% of our young people do not believe that American democracy is preferable to non-democratic forms of government. Can you believe that? In our house, some of our children don't believe that the government that got us from there to here is worth keeping. Can you believe that? Can we allow that? Isn't that stunning? But at the same time, in another data point, 73 to 93% of Americans want the history of our nation to be told to them in deep accuracy, is the words that they use to describe it. Now, that's a hopeful sign. So we have a danger sign and a hopeful sign at the same time. But I think it's incumbent upon us to tell the whole story. It fits the American tapestry, does it not? Now, in the discussions that we had yesterday, and some of the people in the room where we had those discussions, one of the issues that we came down to was that the founders had zeal. They had emotion. They were committed to change. They were committed to building the democratic government in America. But the reason they were like that, y'all, is because they had seen it the other way. They knew what it was like to have a king to get mad at you and come up with the Stamp Act so that every sheet of paper that you wrote anything official on had to have the stamp of the crown on it. Or come up with the Sugar Act so that every teaspoon of sugar you took had to pay a tax to England. Or have the salt tax. And these taxes kept mounting. The declarative acts where the king and the government of England said, oh, by the way, y'all think that y'all are something special over there in y'all little colonies, but we have the right to make any law for you that we feel like, and it ain't none of your business. Well, that's going to make you kind of mad. And that's going to lead to, like, throwing away stuff that they taxed, like the tea tax that led to the Boston Tea Party, which led the English to come back and say, we're going to close the port of Boston. And led them to put in other rules that say, y'all can't trade unless you trade on a British ship, a ship built by somebody in the British Navy. Y'all see how that mounts up, the intolerable acts. Don't it sound intolerable? You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't eat this. You can't wear that. That's a hell of a thing, is it not? And so these people who lived in that era, they had the zeal. But we got kids, this 41%, they know nothing except the blessings of liberty. And maybe the risk is that when you got it and you have it so long, you become blasé about it and you become lackadaisical about it. And so the question is, how do we teach our children to want to have the thing that we know is precious, but they don't think it's precious, and the reason they don't think it's precious is because they got it already. Isn't that something? I mean, basically, I've seen this in my own life. How do you make a young person hungry for knowledge when they're being fed knowledge all the time? I can remember in my childhood, where I came from, I was always reading books. Do you know you had the Encyclopedia Britannica, which was the big bad encyclopedia. And then what was the World Book Encyclopedia was a little down, down low. I was sent home one day to look up, all the children in the class had to look up their names. Well, I looked up John and I found out it was a portable toilet and, okay. But then I looked in the World Book and I looked up John Charles Thomas. My whole name was in the World Book. And good Lord. Well, y'all know there was an opera singer named John Charles Thomas, but I found that out early because I was hungry for knowledge even as a kid. I'm not sure where that comes from, but I'm sure that it's something that we want to promote in our young people. We want them to get that way. We want them to have a passion, and that's what we're going to have to put our heads together about. And so the structure that I propose, this American tapestry, I think that works for that, doesn't it? We can teach a whole lot by that imagery. But I got another one, too. I was thinking about Dvorak's New World Symphony, Anton, who was hired to write a symphony for the New World in America. And y'all know what he did. It's a very famous story. He went around and he listened to the gospel singers, and he went around and he listened to the Native American chants and the drum beats and the rhythm, and he put all that in the New World Symphony. Now, I think it's easier to teach using the American tapestry, but I think it kind of is beautiful to contemplate the American symphony. And so the teachers who are deft enough to do the lesson from the American Symphony, I throw that out to you. That's how our law professors would always just throw something out to you. I throw this out to y'all. Y'all see what you can do with it. And so the American Symphony is another way to go at it. And so I came here in prep to talking to y'all. Now, one of the magic things about Colonial Williamsburg is we have these interpreters. And, you know, they dress like Patrick Henry and Jefferson and Martha Washington and so forth. Now, I'm a new member of the board here, and I didn't know this, but, you know, you go some places, you have people walking around in character, and they basically are following a script. But that's not the way we do it at Colonial Williamsburg. I found out that the interpreters here, basically, they got to go to school. And they've got to learn the character, and they've got to learn where he was born or she was born and where they come from. And so when you meet the interpreters at Colonial Williamsburg, you can just sit down and talk to them. So I asked to talk to Jefferson. I said, I won't have to talk to this crowd about Jefferson. Can I talk to Mr. Jefferson? I want to talk to Patrick Henry. I want to talk to him. So I did. I came here and I sat in a little room with the interpreters in character. I talked to the interpreter of Native American history here, and I learned very interesting things that when I learn them, I want to keep them. But I said to the Native American interpreter, I said, we talk about the Indian tribes, what did they call themselves? And she says, we were nations. We called ourselves nations. And when you look back at the Iroquois League and the Iroquois nations and so forth, they did say nations. Tribe turns out to be a Latin word. And the TRI is a third of something, is a tribe. But the indigenous nations were a whole people at the time that we came here. And so I have learned to say the nations. I talked to Patrick Henry and I said, well, if I was going to talk to a crowd about what they should be doing for the 250th, what do you want me to tell them? And he said, tell them to earn what the founders fought and died for. Now that reminded me of Saving Private Ryan. Remember the end of Saving Private Ryan when the captain is about to die and he says to the young Private Ryan, earn it? But maybe that's the thing we got to teach our children, because 41% of them is about to just let it go. We got to make them understand that this is a hard thing to come by. Now look at who's talking to you. Now I'm a black kid born in segregated Virginia in 1950, prior to Brown versus Board of Education. So I'm born into a segregated, broken, fractured Virginia, and here I am standing up here talking to you about the virtues of democracy. Do you think I'm crazy? Or did I learn something along the way that's a lesson that maybe all of us need to learn? I believe in our nation. I think it's good. I think we can teach our children that it's good. I think we can teach them that you can start one place and end up another. I think that we can give them a spirit that they don't have, but we got to try. And so when we talk about the spirit of what we need to do, I'm drawn back to Longfellow, the poet. And Longfellow wrote a poem about the building of the ship of state. Y'all ever heard Longfellow's poem about the ship of state? It's called The Building of the Ship. I want you to hear the spirit. I think Longfellow was writing maybe 50, 60, 70 years, 100 years after the fact, but he was looking back at this period that we are looking at. And Longfellow said, then the master, in a gesture of command, waved his hand. And at the word, loud and sudden there was heard, all around them and below, the sound of hammers blow on blow, knocking loose the shores and spurs, and see she stirs. She starts, she moves, she seems to feel the thrill of life along her keel, and spurning with her foot the ground, in one exulting, joyous bound, she leaps into the ocean's arms. And lo, from the assembled crowd, there rose a shout prolonged and loud, that to the ocean seemed to say, take her, old bridegroom, old and gray. Take her into thy protecting arms with all her youth and all her charms. How beautiful she is, how fair she lies within those arms that press her form with many a soft caress of tenderness and watchful care. Sail forth into the sea, O ship, Through wind and rain, right onward steer. The moistened eye, the trembling lip are not the signs of doubt or fear. Sail forth into the sea of life, O gentle, loving, trusting wife, and safe from all adversity, upon the bosom of the sea, thy comings and thy goings be. For gentleness and love and trust prevail o'er angry wave and gust, and in the wreck of noble lives, something immortal still survives. Thou too sail on, O ship of state, sail on, O Union strong and great. Humanity with all its fears, with all its hopes for future years, is hanging breathless on thy fate. We know what master laid thy keel, what workman wrought thy ribs of steel, who made each mast and sail and rope, what anvils ring, what hammers beat, in what a forge and what a heat were shaped the anchors of thy hope. Fear not each sudden sound and shock, 'tis of the wave and not the rock. 'Tis but the flapping of the sail, and not a rent made by the gale. In spite of rocks and tempest roar, in spite of false lights on the shore, sail forth, nor fear to breast the sea. Our hearts, our hopes are all with thee. Our hearts, our hopes, our prayers, our tears, our faith triumphant or our fears are all with thee. They're all with America. And we have to sell it to our people, to our children. We have to build it up in ourselves. We got to believe that what we've done is worth keeping.